Our first story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Why do we care about the riff? Talking about all of our favorite albums containing the riff. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson. With me, as always, are my two stooges in music, Justin Swindle, Dylan Adams. How are y'all?
Cold, Mean Gene. Fucking cold.
Yeah, it's frigid, man.
It's a veritable winter wonderland out here in Portland, Tennessee. It's been fantastic for the last few days. It is precious.
You're going to have to cut Dylan open to stay warm, Swindle.
And I thought these things smelled bad on the outside.
There it is.
I'll drive 2 hours to cut Dylan open. Don't tempt me with a good time.
God.
Yeah, it's pretty miserable. We've had some snowstorms up here. We've been like below zero weather, going into work, going into school. Everything's iced over. I've eaten it several times.
I bought more milk in the past week than I've bought in my adult human life so I could drink hot chocolate every day like an old man.
I do miss that kind of, like, just seeing the people scramble to the Kroger, just decking each other just to fight over eggs, milk. The French toast supply is hurting right now in Kentucky and Tennessee, I'm sure.
I actually had to brave the weather yesterday and like go to a Walmart, which is always a great place to go. And I distinctly heard a guy on his phone to his wife. He's like, I hope you weren't wanting eggs because there's not a one left. And he goes, lunch meat? Nope. Cheese? It comes in a can. And like just kept going. I went, there he goes. There was like little to no beer either. That was what was even better. It was just like only thing left were like IPAs and like stouts, but everything else gone.
Damn, poor bastard. Charlene needs her omelets.
Her beer omelets.
Beer omelets.
What's the line from Raising Raising Arizona? Baby needs Pampers.
Oh yeah. It's been a while since I've seen that. Cold aside, winter aside, we have a record to talk about today. We were having so much fun with the New Orleans stuff. I figured we just tag one on for fun. What did you think? Why this record? Why Eyehategod?
I would say when we made our trip to New Orleans that, there's many bands under that kind of sludge, stoner doom umbrella, but we've brought this band up every single episode in some form or fashion. And that being Eyehategod. And I know all three of us thoroughly enjoy this band. We've all seen this band. And I know we have had many a nights where we talk about this album or a couple tracks from this album in particular. And I think Dopesick just really stuck really well. I am disappointed to know there was no Zydeco music on this album at all. I was really expecting that. Sadly disappointed in that facet.
Maybe on the next one.
Sorry.
Maybe in the next
yeah. In the next 6 years or however long it takes. This is one of my favorite records by this band for sure. Dopesick is such a, I could say this really about any of their records, that it is just a bleak, just depraved, as Swindle put it in our Acid Bath episode. It's a hard one to get through. It's abrasive. It doesn't leave you with a good feeling, and nor did it ever try to do anything but that in particular. Any of their records.
It starts from the opening moment of the album. You're ill at ease. It starts you off ill at ease, and it keeps you that way for the whole album.
So this is my favorite Eyehategod record, hands down. Like, I love Take Is Needed for Pain. Hell, I like the most two recent full lengths as well a lot.
Oh yeah.
But this is my favorite, and I was pretty young when I heard this record. I might have been like 17 or something, because I'd read about the opening sequence of the album, and I listened to this album last night just to do a final run through with it. And when that part plays and you kind of hear like this warbling vocal before the screams, and then you hear this bump or this brunt sound, the air just sucked out of the room for me. It was like, oh, okay. Listening to this album is like going through trauma. It's just reliving it.
It certainly, these guys have lived some lives, and it comes through on the record for sure.
A confederacy of ruined lives.
Yeah, there you go. I got into this band like super late, and kind of similar to our Crowbar episode, I definitely got turned on to this band through you guys, and this was around the time of the self-titled back in like 2014. That was my first introduction to the band in general, and then going back and revisiting all of these like their first few records.
Is that when we saw them?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It is.
I know one of the times I saw them, I bought that like self-titled CD, but I didn't know if it was like directly after the album came out, or because they've never stopped touring, even though they like take 7 years, but at least 7 years between every record. They just tour the entire fucking time.
Yeah. Like they just stopped through here last year, but I mean, I guess it's, still early on into the rotation of the records or whatever, but yeah, they'd come out with their latest record like a couple years back, but at the time, let's see, that was 2014. I want to say the record before that, it was probably
years.
14 years since
14
the record
years.
before that. So that one, the self-titled, is incredible. I love that record. It's so good, especially for like, you think a band that had existed for so long at that point, decades, to like come out with, Medicine Noose, what is it, Robitussin, and I forget the name of the song.
Well,
but
they had that great single or split that came out a few years before that had New Orleans as the New Vietnam on it, which is a killer track.
It was on A389 recordings. So, which, they even through this process, we'll kind of talk a little bit about that too, with like some of the singles. They'll just like do that, end up on a comp or do a split with some bands or whatever, or release like the kind of the one-off single thing. But there's some great singles out there from this band as well. I guess I know how Dylan heard this record. I kind of got into this band late. Swindle, did you have like any sort of relationship with this band in your youth? Like, how did you get into Eyehategod?
It may have been like exactly the same as how I got into Crowbar from the I'm Broken video, because in the I'm Broken video, Phil's wearing a Crowbar t-shirt and an Eyehategod t-shirt, and I was like, oh, let me listen to Eyehategod.
And how did it compare
to either Crowbar or Pantera?
Yeah.
It's definitely I mean, kind of like Eyehategod and Crowbar may elicit similar emotions, like lyrically, but Eyehategod is a lot harder to fucking listen to. It's a lot more challenging, at least, to listen to.
That's a really good point, though. I think you were talking about the same. It's all in the same sphere. It's like none of the lyrical themes, kind of like that tweet we were talking about. You have to like have failed a little bit, or you've had to like, had some turmoil in your life to really understand both of these bands. But like the Eyehategod stuff is just wow. Like
social embarrassment, at least one good time, social embarrassment, and some form of addiction, no matter what it may be. Like
no question.
That's it.
Yeah. I listened to this record, but I also listened to the first two records as well going into it. And I'm like, I had to like go for a walk afterwards. I was like, man, this is rough.
It's like watching that 70s Possession movie or fucking Antichrist.
Oh,
like,
what are you talking about? It's like watching a fucking snuff film. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
God.
Same thing.
Oh, I mean, you're just like, to what Austin said, taking a walk. Like, when I got done listening to this record last night, I just kind of I remember I just kind of put my hands on my knees and went, all right, now I got to go to bed. Like, I got to figure this out.
Kind of dreams are you having?
God, I didn't. And that's the key, right? I didn't. And that's very fitting of this band. But to Swindle's point, the Pantera tie-in, like, that was probably like de facto it. It may not have been like, oh, I need to check that band out, but it was probably something along the lines of, I know that band. I've heard it, because in the Pantera videos that they had, like the long player videos, I know there's the band playing in the background. Like, you can hear it during certain points where all the shenanigans and hijinks are taking place.
Yeah. Well, and it's a good point, and I know we'll get into this a little later in the episode too. What, with Phil, for all his faults, he certainly was like a champion of the underground scene, and especially his own kind of hometown bands like Crowbar and Eyehategod, obviously in the videos, but often taking these bands on some pretty big tours. The fact that Eyehategod literally played arenas is an insane thought to have at all, but we'll get into that a little later. This band, while it is like bleak, I feel like this is this may be like some of the goofiest dudes, the like group of guys, like at all. That's it. Like, all of this feels like, it doesn't feel very premeditated in a lot of ways. It's like, it's all feeling, like the way it's written, the way it's lyrically as well. Like, yeah, it comes from a place, it comes from experience, but it is like just basically guys kind of jamming and feeling it out. It feels like a lot of the time.
You want to talk about like how this band doesn't necessarily take itself extremely serious. There's a great Decibel article about the big tour that they did with Pantera and I think White Zombie. Where like arena full of people, they're obviously opening, so like the crowd's kind of still coming in. Like Eyehategod kicks in, and I think there's a line in there about Mike said, how's everybody doing tonight? Whatever. The crowd kind of chants back and he goes, all right. Who's got leukemia? And like kicks right into the song, and it's like, all right, this is what we're set up for. This is the precedent, and that is reflected on these records. Like there's a lot of, I'm sure, very, very dark tongue-in-cheek humor in a lot of these things.
We'll never know. Lyrics are nowhere, and I cannot discern any of them. Not that I'm trying to.
In the song, what is it? Zero. I can't remember the track name. Hold on.
Zero Nowhere.
Zero Nowhere. I can audibly hear him saying zero and nowhere at certain points.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Well, at least it tells you what song you're on.
In one of the interviews I heard while we were doing research for this album, I think Jimmy talked about how this album was the first album they recorded with tuners.
Oh my God. Jesus.
Like, for the two records before this, they would just pick the guy that sounded the most in tune and then tune off this one guy.
That is
fair.
Very poetic.
It's funny you say that, because this is the first record they actually had like a producer or someone outside of the band to kind of help them record the album. And so I'm sure that was like, hey, like
y'all should
just
get
tune. But I've read plenty of things where they were basically stating, yeah, we would just pull straight from the DAT tape, and that was pretty much it. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't really, they were fully in charge of whatever was being played and what was going to end up on the recording, which, those first two records, In the Name of Suffering, Take Is Needed for Pain, they have like a wonderfully dark, very noisy, very abrasive, all the things that I really, really like about this band. All of the qualities are in those records, and they kind of stand on their own in that way. I would say this certainly sounds like the best thing they had done at this point, like production wise. But again, that's not taking away from those previous records. It's a time and a place.
I love the production on this record.
It's great.
Love it. It is doesn't sound underproduced, but it's definitely not the most polished thing because producer Billy Anderson has worked with a lot of different acts, and probably at this point he had already worked with like Sleep, Neurosis. Maybe he was about to work with Neurosis. Actually, talk about Bleak Records, I believe Through Silver and Blood came out the very same year this record came out. So you want to talk about like crawling in a hole and listen to a record. But his production is always this very organic, kind of natural sounding production style. And for whatever reason, it fits this band really well in this album. I mean, it's dense. Like the guitars are really loud, almost like soup thick.
Everything's fucking loud.
Yes.
The drums are also so fucking
they're
loud.
really up front in the mix. Mike's vocals to me are I love Mike's vocals. I think they're just despicable sounding.
Yeah.
It definitely sounds like a guy dying or being beaten, and it is beaten down by life for sure. And he does a great job at it. Like there's no way this band could have another vocalist. There's no way. This guy is just, it's almost another instrument. And the way he's not buried in the mix, but he's not the most front and center thing. And I love how that fits because there's a lot of really good kind of like extreme metal bands that do that. And I always love it when the vocals almost sound like another instrument when they're in that type of mix. And this is really fitting for this record.
They, I think that, they made a good choice in getting Billy and, a few other people to help him out, which we'll get into in a second. But I agree. I think probably through his kind of friendship with Neurosis, he was actually working on a Buzzoven record at the time that
Soar?
I believe Soar, yeah, because it would have been 1994. Eyehategod was on tour with them. They had a show in San Francisco where Billy's based, and so Neurosis also played on that show, and they kind of met each other, and they were just like, hey, I'm sure they knew like some of the stuff that he had worked on, or obviously heard the process perhaps through Buzzoven, and then got him to work on the record. So he came out to New Orleans to do that. It definitely makes a difference when you have someone who maybe has some experience. But like you said, it's not overproduced. You wouldn't want like an Eyehategod record to sound squeaky clean by any means.
Right.
So he definitely understood what this band was about and how to record them and capture the moment for sure.
Hey, Billy, we want you to produce our record. Okay, guys, how do you want it to sound? Well, you see that swamp? I want it to sound just like that. What does that mean? What does that mean? And this record explains that. It sounds like something is coming up from underwater. Like it is, you don't know what's happening. You're disoriented when you're listening to this. You've probably shit your pants once. Like it's a fucking experience to listen to this record.
Swamp out of your pants, swamp in your pants.
Yep.
They did get some friends to help him on this record too. Uncredited, Pepper Keenan, Phil Anselmo. A lot of the articles will kind of state that Pepper was a co-producer of the record. But then the band will state like, yeah, he helped us out with some stuff, some tones and, maybe some vocal recording stuff. But for the most part, Billy had the most hand in working on the record. And then, Phil, I guess, aided in some way. I'm not really sure exactly how that worked out.
I would presume he probably did some vocal stuff. He's been really close with Mike for a lot of years. I think Mike actually lives, or at one point was living on Phil's like property. But Phil had also done some stuff with Crowbar for like vocal producing for Broken Glass. So I'm presuming that was some sort of involvement there.
Mike Williams, definitely an interesting thing to point out here too. Obviously a New Orleans band, as we've been stating, but Mike was living in New York City at the time. He was living in Brooklyn. So he was having to like travel out basically back and forth, these like long journeys to work on the record. I think I read where the band would essentially just record their demos and send it to Mike while he was living in Brooklyn. And then he would just kind of run with it and whatever. But, everybody was kind of split up at the time. I think Jimmy Bauer had lived in Atlanta for a little bit. He briefly moved away, moved back. But yeah, it's kind of interesting how they were able to kind of piece this together. A guy from San Francisco, singers in New York, your guitar player might be in Atlanta, all that shit.
I think they're still kind of doing that. From the more recent interviews, it sounded like Mike is again, not living in New Orleans, and for a time during like COVID shutdown, it sounded like Bauer was living in Richmond and but may have moved back to New Orleans. So it seems like the most recent record, they had to do a similar thing probably.
Yeah. Definitely showing almost 30 years of time there too, of like how different it is to record something that spread out back in the 90s versus what it is now. I mean, hell, I mean, look at us. I mean, you can record in like your fucking closet and go, all right, hey, buddy that lives in the UK, you'll have these in the morning, like kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which, you know, maybe in the early days of this band, they started in like 88, and it seemed like they had all day long to just kind of play and jam out and really feel out a song. You know, from what I read, it was kind of just almost like a club in those early days of just guys coming in and out, like recording or not recording, but playing and, you know, writing songs. It was very like
loose.
It was very loose. There was no stress to kind of, they had no ambition to like put out a record with that band or like go on tour necessarily, because everybody else was already doing their own things in all of these other bands anyway. So this was really kind of like a side project from the beginning that, you know, after the first record, which was released on randomly like a French label had reached out to the band, wanted to put out the record. It gets circulated around and attracts the interest of Century Media to put out their sophomore record.
I love the interviews about Century Media from this band during this time period.
This band hated Century Media. Like, you know, I think it's another thing, kind of like with the Acid Bath thing of maybe a young band jumping into a thing. And also really not, you know, it didn't seem like they cared all that much about, they do it 100%, but it wasn't like maybe like the first thing to, all right, we got to make sure everything's covered. We're getting paid on this. We're getting covered when we go out on tour. All these little things. They're young guys. They don't know exactly all the ins and outs of the business. And so by this record, it seemed like they were already fed up with their deal and their contract with Century Media. They did not like their relationship with that label at all.
It is funny to think about that because Century Media is, you know, one of the bigger metal labels now, right? Mm-hmm. Probably really started to kick into gear in the early 2000s, right around the time the band finished up their contract with Century Media. You know, during that time period between their last Century Media release, which I think that is Confederacy of Ruined Lives, into what was to be the self-titled record. There's a 14-year span. I mean, that label became massive. And I'm sure back in this period of time, independent labels honestly didn't know how to do business either. They were essentially just like, well, this is a band we know we could put some records out and have the records pressed. And it's a great band. We really enjoy it. We don't know how to promote anything. You know, we just got done promoting, you know, a fucking Grave record or something like that during this time period. You know, what do we do? Music's changing. How do we handle this? And these guys are essentially, for lack of any descriptor, they're a punk band. They're a hardcore band. They all listen to Black Sabbath, but they're a hardcore band. And they're just like, this is what bands do. Let's sign a label. You know, probably could have signed to like Amphetamine Reptile or one of those like more punk centric labels, but they wouldn't have known what to do with them either. It was like St. Vitus signing to SST. Like, you know, what do you do? And again, younger dudes just going, we just want to play music and tour. They signed to a label, and then 3 years in, they're going, fuck. I am eating ketchup sandwiches. Man, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
What's funny is the fucking last two records, the self-titled one, the overseas like release was handled by Century Media, and the most recent record, the one that came out in 2021, was released by fucking Century Media.
Yep.
So, the crazy thing, after the release of this record, from the moment they were doing interviews about this record in particular, they were just dogging this label like any chance they got, like in interviews. They weren't like holding back. They were being brutally honest about how they felt about Century Media. And yeah, they essentially would put out Dopesick. They were already trying to get off the really the only reason I think that they even did this record was that they would either have to put out an album or they would have to go on hiatus. So they did Dopesick. And then they did some compilations. They did Confederacy of Ruined Lives. You know, the label even put out a compilation, Southern Discomfort, which they did not ask for consent to release that. They basically just kind of cobbled things together. I think there's even titles of tracks that they never referred to as like a band in a certain way. And then I think the last full length they did, Confederacy of Ruined Lives, was in 2000. The live album, 10 Years of Abuse and Still Broke, fitting title.
Good title.
Was the last thing that they ever really did for the label, I believe. It fulfilled the obligation. But the self-title was on Housecore, and then they signed more recently to put out that Nomadic Behavior record. And I think it was really just because Mike has like a friend that works for the label, and you know, he kind of enticed him to like come back to Century Media. All the people that had worked there before are no longer there. And they're not even really signed to the label. They just license the music. So they own all of the rights to their own music. It's all good and whatever. They control that basically.
And that's probably why you're seeing some represses of their albums. I think in the last couple of years, I picked up a repress of Take Is Needed for Pain. I bought it straight from the band. And a lot of labels don't do that. So I'm wondering if they actually own the rights to their back catalog, which is wild. It is funny to think too, like they were on Housecore in 2014. That's Phil's label, which is still releasing stuff to this day. But I'm wondering if maybe the reason Century Media was used in Europe, it's probably a different office. It's probably a different group of people over there. Century Media, I think, is a subsidiary of like Sony Red at this point. And I'm wondering if maybe Housecore didn't have the distribution for Europe. Which happens a lot. Like I know a lot of relapse bands have a little bit of issue with Europe. Sometimes they have to use another label to distribute their titles over there. But in 96, a little bit different. You're signed to a label, you're signed to a label. They own your life. It's still like the 1970s. They're like, we got you for 6 records, guys. 6, count them. 6. You're going to make us money.
And, you know, even before they were able to work with some other kind of like indie labels, you know, for the splits and some of the comps that they were on leading up to Dopesick. Some of my favorite stuff that the band's ever written has come from this era. This like in between the sophomore and the third record, Ruptured Heart Therapy, this like 7-inch that they did through a label called Bovine Records based out of Madison. I want to say the guy was in a band called Thug. And he appears on like a comp as well, Loud and Ugly Volume 2 from 95, which was really cool. It had Eyehategod, Despise You, Floor, Apartment 213, and Thug. They did a couple splits with the band 13, who will come back on this record as well. Really great stuff. One of my favorite songs of all time is on a split with 13, Serving Time in the Middle of Nowhere, which was using the Gummo soundtrack, and maybe like a couple years later.
Yeah,
so,
I couldn't remember what track was on there.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of my favorite songs. I've still not seen that movie because it's so hard you can't watch it like anywhere really. You'd have to buy a physical copy of it basically, but I've not seen it.
Have you ever you've worked in the food industry, as I know Swindle has. Have you guys ever had to like scrape the food into like a garbage disposal and you turn the water on to get it to go down? I know it's a little bit more industrial and like restaurants and stuff.
Sure.
That's what the movie looks like. That's what the movie Gummo is like. It's like watching that just like slop down a drain. Yep.
Like the sketty aftermath in a Tupperware container or something.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's just like it's like a live action Squidbillies. Like it's precisely what it is.
Do y'all want to start a band called Sketty Aftermath in the Tupperware container?
God almighty Christ.
What would it sound like?
God, I hope it's just like
fucking carnival music.
Carnival music?
An Italian restaurant.
Did you say carnival music? Yeah.
Yeah, Scalpini.
So I kind of went through some of the in-between splits and comps leading up to this record. It was eventually put out through Century Media, April 96. We kind of mentioned some of the players on this record. Mike Williams, of course, on vocal duties and songwriting. He wrote most of the lyrics, although I maybe don't know all of what he's saying. He wrote most of the lyrics on this album. I mentioned the band 13 earlier. Alicia Morgan from the band 13, the vocalist of the band, is credited with writing a couple songs on the album as well. She's also, I found out, a guest vocalist on the debut Brutal Truth record as well. That was kind of a neat little find. But
what's the debut Brutal Truth record?
Extreme conditions demand extreme responses.
That's it. It's an earache record. Swindle always likes the one with the guy's face. It's like, it looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger with a monkey face on it. Good band. I like that band.
That's a fun band.
Jimmy Bower, of course, who has been he's perhaps one of the most important figures within this scene in general, just having, played in every band under the sun in New Orleans. Of course, we got Crowbar, we mentioned in the last episode. He's in the supergroup Down. He's in the supergroup Super Joint Ritual, Super Joint / whatever. I think he even was a live member of COC at one point.
He sure was.
Early 2000s.
I forgot about that.
He's done it all. But I would say this is kind of like maybe his baby in a lot of ways. This is kind of his thing, right? Like, he is the driving force. He's the sound. He's the riff. So I would have to say that this is perhaps maybe where he shines to me the most. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, I would say that. Between that and I do like his drum performances on the records he's on. But in particular, it's this band. I mean, the track's not on this album, but the first Eyehategod live footage I ever saw was like early YouTube days. They're playing some show and they're playing the track Jackass and the Will of God. And I think he's either got a cigarette dangling out of his mouth or it's in the headstock, still lit. You can see the smoke going. And like, he is just kicking into a riff. I'm like, all right, like this is what it is. Like, Jimmy's the dude.
We also have Brian Patton on guitar as well in this band. He's no longer a member of this group, having left a handful of years back, but also a member of Soylent Green from the New Orleans area as well. Can't forget about that. Vince LeBlanc on bass. He had replaced Mike Schultz, the original bass player of this band.
We also have Joey Lacaze on drums. And looks like some songwriting credits here. I do want to bring up something funny, kind of not necessarily funny, but in particular, the wit of Mike Williams. When we saw Eyehategod in 2014,
I knew this was going to come up.
Obviously, this was the self-titled record. This was supposed to be recorded with Joey, and he obviously passed. I believe it was a heart attack that took him.
He had like long. He's on the record.
Is that his performance on the record?
It's a posthumously released album.
Okay.
So he is on the record, but had like struggled with asthma, I believe, for
right.
many years, and had unfortunately passed away due to some respiratory issues.
But like,
so they got Aaron Hill, I think, is the current drummer of the band, still a member.
Yep.
But so we would have saw Aaron performing with Eyehategod as a 5-piece at the time.
Yes, we saw Brian with him at this point. So like when any musician from an underground scene passes away, there's kind of a gathering of arms and a gathering of memories of it, and there's kind of tributes being paid. But during the show, someone from the crowd yelled out like "Rip Little Joey," which I think might have been a nickname given to him by the band because he was younger than the other guys. And without missing a beat, I think Mike was just like, "How good did you fucking know him?"
Yeah, he didn't even look up, man. He just like, we were like, "Hoof." Which, I'll have to listen to it because I was looking for that tour. They were on tour with Ringworm and Enabler from Chicago. And there is a link I posted in our notes of the show. I think someone recorded that show. So you can actually listen to the show. So I'm going to have to check this out, and maybe I'll include that in the thing. But
How good did you know him? Hey, Louisville, what's up? It's been a few years since we played here. Hasn't been that long. It's been a few.
Oof. Yeah,
Man.
it is like you can hear that. I love that was the first. I think that's the only time I've ever seen this band perform.
Me
But,
too.
They killed it. It was awesome, and getting to see all the songs from the self-titled was really enjoyable and a great experience. I would say I got the same venue I got to see Crowbar at. So
Yep.
whatever.
Whatever.
So we definitely like you've got a cast and crew here on this record. Like,
I forgot to mention my favorite member of this band.
Yeah, we've got another member that we hahaven't talked about yet, right?
It's Feedback. It's
God Almighty Christ! It is. That is the uncredited, probably underpaid member of this band. I kind of want to turn the floor over to Swindle here, particularly about the feedback in this band. And what the feedback means to him in particular in regards to this band.
This is the first album I remember listening to by Eyehategod, and for some reason I specifically remember I used to work at that restaurant and I worked all fucking day, and leaving work I was like, I gotta listen to something other than fucking jazz music on NPR or I'll fall asleep on the way home.
Yeah.
So I fucking put on this Eyehategod record, and it gets to the Ruptured Heart Theory song, which is 40 seconds solid of just
nothing but
so high, so fucking high pitched, piercing feedback. And I was just like white knuckle gripping the fucking steering wheel, being like, I'll never fall asleep again.
It's like done in a way that is
it's
tasteful.
fucking musical.
It makes sense. You could be annoying. Bands have and will be annoying using feedback because they just don't know how to implement it in the way that Eyehategod does. I've never heard a band like this where I don't even have to hear the instrument. I don't have to hear a chord or a vocal part. If I hear the feedback, I just know it's Eyehategod.
You fucking know who it is. Yeah.
That's all it is, which is insane. So the fact that a band like that could use it in a way that kind of sells the point of being bleak and abrasive. It is abrasive, but it works. It's not annoying. It's not like irritating just to be irritating. It works for what the band is doing.
I am usually the first person at a show, probably not the first, but of our friends group that will probably go, if I see someone like on stage, like tuning by ear or like with another instrument, I'm like, fuck off. This band gets a pass for that. But if they don't have a noise gate and I hear that, like, and I see those high gain heads or whatever it is, like, there's nothing worse than like seeing a band with like a 5150 or like a 6505, those like big gainy monsters, and there's no noise gate. And you just hear that awful screech in between it. It's like, do something about that. This band, for any reason, can do whatever they want with feedback because it makes sense. It's musical. It's not just feedback for the sake of feedback. It's an atmosphere for this band. And it just works so well. Bringing up the feedback side of it, we were talking about this off air for the last couple of days, but Jimmy Bower only uses 4 strings on his fucking guitar.
Which I didn't know. I had no idea.
I think I had read that, and years ago, Guitar World used to have those like rig rundowns at the end, and I distinctly remember them going over his 2 guitars, and they had 4 strings on it. But for whatever reason, I thought he used all 6 in this band. But he only uses 4 strings, and I think Swindle and I were kind of talking to each other. I said, it's got to be for the fact that he couldn't control like feedback or something like that on those 2 strings. And it ends up being that. But it also just makes it that much kind of more comical to go, oh yeah, I couldn't control the feedback on those 2. We got rid of them. So we're going to tune to C, and the feedback we get from these strings is just going to be this like gut churning rumble. Yep. 4 strings, also plays with this tone knob turned all the way down.
All the way down.
All the way down. Just the thick. It's almost like he's got a wah on. I'm surprised he even uses a bridge pickup, but he does. Like, he doesn't even use a neck pickup.
He didn't probably exclusively use this guitar during this record, but now he kind of exclusively uses this one Gibson called the Sonex that was only made for like 4 years, and it was made out of particle board or something. It's just like the cheapest piece of shit guitar that you can find. And Jimmy Bower's like, this is what I want my guitar to sound like.
This is the Eyehategod guitar.
I have a story about a Gibson Sonex. Cody Stewart, a former bandmate of mine, and the drummer and songwriter, producer of kind of the modern metalcore band, the Browning, he had a Gibson Sonex when I met him. I believe it was a white one. And like I've held one of these things and like played one of these things a couple times and didn't even dawn on me as like, oh yeah, this is the Eyehategod guitar. They sound cool. I mean, they don't sound bad, but it's definitely like a product of like the late 70s, early 80s. But I could be wrong. It may have been another Gibson, but I distinctly remember him having one. And Jimmy like going like, yep, this is my guitar. And he probably owns a couple of them.
Oh yeah. Throw them around in the back seat or some shit like that, you know?
I've seen him play like SGs throughout the years as well. He even had the monkey sticker on his SG like Tony did for a lot of years. You know, tuning down that low, no tone knob, no high end frequencies. You're playing a bass, man.
Yeah.
There's a fucking good story Jimmy Bower had about that SG, the green SG he had for a while. He said, like, we were touring in Japan and I bought so many trinkets and so much bullshit that I didn't have room to bring my guitar back. So I gave my guitar to someone else in Japan so that he could take bullshit back to America from being on tour. And I think that's why he stopped fucking playing SGs. And he was like, yeah, I came back a few years later and saw this person on tour again and was like, oh, you're still using that SG, huh? And he was like kind of wanting the guy to give it back to him. And the guy was like, yeah, and I love it.
Yeah, right. And I didn't just give it away for some fucking
I'm sure
thing with like
he's at like he's getting ready to go home. Guitar case is like he's got all this like extra stuff he's going home with. He's like, what can I like part with? He's looking around. He's like, you know, this old worn out socks, underwear, whatever else. He's like trinkets and stuff from Japan, like little toys. And he just keeps looking at the guitar like, you know, I could fit a lot in that case. He's like, I got 2 Sonexes at home. Kid, here you go.
I got this suitcase full of naked shit. I almost had it.
You can't even get
it. Damn, I had this whole suitcase full of naked lady pens, but you know, this guitar, what am I doing?
And just like so nonchalantly, I can see it now. Just him just passing it on. It's like a CJ moment or something.
It works though. CJ moment. It works though, and I think it definitely, you know, the guy's looking for a sound. The guy was definitely influenced by Black Sabbath. Definitely influenced by the Melvins. Side 2 of My War. You know, Swans, Carnivore, what you name it. The guy wears his influences on his sleeves, or he'll be the first to tell you like, hey, like, yeah, all right, I get kind of lumped into being this guy that maybe helped usher in the scene, but I'm literally just doing what these other guys did. Like, if not for the Melvins, if not for Pepper Keenan giving me that debut, I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't be making the noise that I am without the Melvins.
I love how inexpensive this whole band is.
Yeah.
The whole band. They were using solid state heads. Particularly still do. Yes. But I believe he switched from that Randall head, which is the Randall RG100. That's kind of like, that's the sludge sound, right? That's the one that Kirk uses. That's the one that Sammy used up until I believe he started getting his own signature heads. He's still really fond of like these Randall heads. And I believe in that same video that you and I watched, Swindle, he even said like, oh yeah, I've still got the Randall. It's just out in the van.
Mhm.
Like, and there's
I think now he has a splitter. I think the dude Brian, is that the guy that
Brian
quit
Patton.
the band?
Mhm.
I think they just took Brian's rig because Brian quit because he had a kid.
Yeah.
But he's using like Brian's rig
To thicken
and
it up.
his own rig so that he can still get both sounds,
Yep.
like the I Hate God sound.
Remarkable. And it's his whole rig probably cost, because in that same video, he's like, yeah, I bought these 2 Mesa cabs from Kirk in like the 90s for like $250. So like his whole rig probably cost shy of $1,100, like guitar included.
And yet we're still getting records like we're getting now. Like that's
Yep.
so crazy. It just goes to show you that you could use, fucking just dog shit. Well, it just goes to show that you could use very inexpensive gear and pump out. So it's just the punk aesthetic. It's the hardcore aesthetic. This band is doing it.
Like, this is when inexpensive gear was inexpensive gear. Like, this is when you got it was either the $300 guitar, which was a lot back then, or the $3,000 guitar. It's like, there was no in between like now. It's, well, here's this guitar, but something's wrong with the neck and the strings are a mile off the board, and, or this one pickup just keeps popping out, or like, it's like, just fuck it. We got to make it work. I want it to sound like Sabbath somehow.
Use that Spider too, if that's all that you got. Fucking use it.
Yeah.
And now it's like, dudes like us are scrolling through forums or whatever, just like, all right, whose it's you? Like, is it some Russian big muff or whatever? Something that he probably just picked up in a pawn shop somewhere. It didn't matter. We've been talking a lot about the things outside of this record, but maybe we should get into the record.
Yes.
The first song, probably the standout track. Not to say the rest of the record isn't great, because it is, but the first song on the album really sets the pace for the entire record.
What a name.
My name is God. I hate you. Incredible.
When they named this track, they were all sitting around the room just like, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
They were just sitting there going like, Mike, what's the name of this track? Let's just call it this.
Yep.
God, that's perfect. And just howling with laughter.
It almost got them kicked out of the studio they were in. This has maybe one of my favorite openings of an I Hate God song ever, because it's literally just Mike belting out, just growling, and then you hear just the shattering of glass to really kick us off to this record. You're in for it. They actually did that. They took a bottle and smashed it in the studio in New Orleans, and it shattered everywhere. It was on the studio floor, and the studio owner called Century Media and asking, do these guys have like mental problems? Like, what's going on? They need to get out of here. And I guess somebody had, I think, cut themselves on the glass that they had shattered, and were smearing like pigs and all sorts of shit.
That's the Charlie Manson thing.
Yeah. Oh my God. They were smearing it all over the studio. And yeah, definitely very, very close call. I'm surprised that they were able to make this record after that.
Hey man, the 90s were something. And there's a phrase I've heard for like the last few years, being around my day-to-day people, and they're just like, they got no act right is the phrase. And like, this is 100% that. They just have no idea of like, we can't do this.
Yeah. They're just a bunch of just a bunch of guys who are like around each other too much. They don't know, like, hey man, maybe this joke works for the guys, but maybe not for some non-regulars,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And also, they are on some stuff. There's some stuff, extracurricular stuff going on.
No.
What makes you say
way.
that? Could it be a song like, I don't know,
Cereal,
methamphetamine or whatever?
No, it's very clear that this band has a checkered history with substances. Case in point, the title of the fucking album. But you know what? I think we would have got the same results from it if they were sober. I really do.
Which that Mike 9 may still be sober. He went into sobriety. I don't know if he still is, but
Katrina did it.
They're still releasing music.
Yeah.
And he's sober now.
Yep.
Or has been sober.
It's like the Steve-O theory, man. Oh God, is he not going to be able to do the things that he did when he was high? No, he just got worse. Like he got sober and just started doing more like terrible shit. It's like, all right, I hate God syndrome, man. That opening track sets the theme of the whole record.
Yeah.
38 minutes, whatever it is, like the whole thing. What I like about this record a lot before we start digging into the other tracks is there's a lot of like hardcore tracks on this album.
This fucking song, one of the notes that I took about this song specifically is like the fast part in the middle reminds me of maybe Right Brigade or Super Touch by fucking Bad Brains off of the self-titled record. Like, yeah, the fast part was like, I was like, oh shit, that's Bad Brains. That's fucking...
I've got some notes in here that are like, this is a Minor Threat part. Like when I heard it, I was like, this is Minor Threat. It's very evident that these guys grew up listening to like probably Void, all of those like the Washington bands, everything like that. Probably a lot of East Coast punk. It's very clear that Black Flag was an influence. Probably the band Blast, which they did a split with. All those. I'm trying to remember what the band that Wino was a big fan of. The Faith. I think they're a.
Oh yeah, with like the split.
Is it Faith Void?
Yeah, well, Faith has Ian MacKay's brother in it.
Okay.
Yeah,
and I'm sure they were listening to a lot of that like first wave hardcore, and it's very reminiscent on this record. Like, this track's really cool, and that would be Dog's Holy Life, which is again such a cool title. This band definitely has some cool song titles. Definitely some that aren't so cool, but you know, this band has some cooler song titles. But let's not be confused with like, yeah, there's hardcore, but you still got Black Sabbath on this record. Masters of Legalized Confusion.
Yeah, definitely some like Sabbathy kind of bluesy riffs for sure. The thing that I noted on this was, again, with the lyrics, Mike himself kind of touched on it in the NOLA doc, I think, where he's like, I like writing about stuff that confuses people. I like writing very cryptically. And he even named Masters of Legalized Confusion, like almost as like a mantra, like, this is perfect. This is like what I'm about. Like, I want people thinking, I want people confused. I don't want them to know anything. But I guess it still evokes certainly a feeling for sure.
Yeah. There's that track in particular sounds like Volume 4, maybe Masters of Reality or Master of Reality stuff there. You know, I kind of got some Sleep Holy Mountain kind of vibes in this track. For sure.
That riff that's like two minutes in.
Yep.
I definitely was like, this sounds like stoner metal, except like the drums were like they weren't like halftime drums. It wasn't like the big washy.
They were on top of the beat.
Right. I was like, which they do later, I think, Lack of Almost Everything. They do another like stoner riff, but they do the big beat on that one. But I was not expecting it to be like a double time beat or whatever.
It's, you know, we haven't really talked about Joey's drumming on this record. I really like it. It definitely sounds like he and Jimmy were like, they got together, probably learned how to play together, because the way you can hear the riffs being written and the drums being played, the drums play to the riff. It's not just a timekeeper in particular. Like it's keeping time, but he's playing with the riff. Each note that the guitar plays, Joey's playing something else, you know, and it fits that way.
I would assess that to like kind of how this band even started, where I think Joey even said in an article I read where they formed their style basically from not knowing how to play and just playing together and learning from one another, and then kind of making it work in a way that made sense, or like, hey, this is it. And I'm sure it was just kind of like that, where you're not necessarily, it's not technical stuff here. It's literally just
punk rock shit.
This sounds fine and great. Yeah. And his drumming is very excellent and big on this record.
He's got, and you don't hear it a lot from this band, but there are certain instances throughout this band's catalog that you hear he's got that swing to him as well. Like you can hear it in some of the Sabbathy parts on this record, Sabbathian, as I said in an older episode. But you can hear it. He's got that great swing, that kind of Bill Ward. And I'm sure a lot of it comes from, a lot of like the Zydeco music they were hearing growing up too, like that swing. There's a band from New Orleans, I think called the Meters. I think that's a big band from that era that had a lot of that swing. What's the Dr. John? That's another one that I know these guys have talked about listening to. And, there's that kind of swing and that kind of bop and upbeat feel to it. Speaking of a bop, Dixie Whiskey, one of my favorite tracks on the album. Like this thing is just an upbeat, just kind of bop and groove to it. To me, this song has the riff on it. Like it's just that main riff that's in this song. This thing is a simple track. It's essentially 1 to 3 riffs, just really groovy, and it's fucking greasy. Greasy. I love it. Mike's vocals on this track are so fucking cool. I believe he has described himself as having a curdled milk vocal.
Yeah,
and it's like, I'll take it. All right. I guess he's just got a really recognizable voice. And the more I listened to this album in preparation, the more I was like, God damn, that's like a great punk rock, like just trashy sounding voice to me.
The next song we got, as I mentioned, was kind of featured on a previous little 7-inch, Ruptured Heart Theory, which I've heard bands kind of recreate like the kind of long form feedback before as well. There's a song off of Worthless, the Weekend Nachos record, that is literally just feedback for a damn near minute straight. And that's another band that I think does it well, or at least they're certainly a hardcore band, but they have a lot of like sludge metal influence as well, especially Eyehategod, and they have used feedback to their benefit in a lot of ways. But I mean, it kind of all starts with this shit here as well. Another band you could even mention, Thou, of course. Thou, Baton Rouge's own Thou. Another band that I could probably hear some feedback from that band and know, oh, okay, yeah, that's them.
There's some like lurching and dirging parts to this song that when I heard it, like obviously you go back to their influences and it's like, oh yeah, it could be the Melvins, could be Carnivore, first typo record. But as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, that's a Thou thing. Like that's what happened 20 plus years later. This is a great track. I know this is Swindle. Is this your favorite track on the record? Without a doubt.
My favorite Eyehategod song. Honestly, like this song and Francis Farmer by Nirvana are like the two feedback songs for me, like in music.
So you saying that, when I went in and listened to this record, like I hadn't listened to it in a while, and I heard the feedback on the record, I was like, God damn, that sounds just like In Utero, like feedback. And they're interchangeable. It's that type of just musical feedback. Mike has some vocal things on the album that I love, where it almost sounds like he's heaving a little bit. Like he's not necessarily doing like a vocal take, but it like emphasizes parts. And it's just like him running his mouth across the mic or something, just like getting breath. And it's in this track, it adds so much to it.
So there's the feedback in the very beginning of the song, but also this song is so fucking slow that they let a chord ring out enough that it feeds back like after almost every fucking chord they play.
I can, we talked about it in the Crowbar episode, but you can almost hear the speakers just like pulsing with all of that feedback. Because as we've all done the thing where you hit the big chord, you walk up to the speaker and you can feel the guitar vibrating and the speaker vibrating to a point like, those speakers are going to pop at some point. And it's just like, where's the good point? Like I got to get right there with it.
Are there any other standout tracks to you guys on this album?
Methamphetamine was like my favorite riff. The big riff in Methamphetamine was my favorite riff on the album.
I would say out of the last kind of back half of this record, I think the intro riff and Lack of Almost Everything, that very like My War-esque riff is fucking amazing. There's a great kind of Sabbath boogie riff in there. Methamphetamine, as Swindle said, it's a one riff song. Like it just it proves that you can make a song can be a riff, or a riff can be a song. It proves it with that.
I like a lot of that stuff, and maybe we touched on in the Crowbar episode too a little bit, where you kind of pick the riff, and maybe to some people it may sound it's not lazy, but it works, where it's just like there is something to repetition, something to like the riff just kind of being driven into your skull over and over again. It's not necessarily, it's not bad songwriting. It is more or less feeling, which I think this band does really well. One funny thing about this song in particular too is that just to tie the label back into it, they kind of fucked up. I don't know if it's the original pressing, but Methamphetamine and Peace Through War, the titles were switched on a pressing of the record. So like if you were listening to Methamphetamine, you were actually listening to Peace Through War.
Peace Through War.
So
which is there's some great parts in that song. That sounds like hardcore crossover era COC to me.
Right.
Hearing that again, another great hardcore track on here. I think Broken Down But Not Locked Up is disgusting. I think that whole song is just filthy and disgusting sounding. That song to me is where the production really shines on the album. Man, it's something fucking else. It also has that Minor Threat riff at the end of it.
I was gonna say that I didn't mean to cut Dylan off. I didn't know he was still talking about Broken Down. But the end of the record, Anxiety Hangover, the very end is like very in the same vein of the end of Nevermind. Endless Nameless is just like fucking heavy, just like smashing the guitar, smashing the drum, and Mike just like screaming as hard as he can.
So
fucking primal shit.
That is my favorite overall track on the record. Anxiety Hangover. It's a dirge. I even like in my notes, I was like, oh, it's the ballad. Like it is just a dirgy descending riff the entire time. And it sounds like Slow, Deep, and Hard to me. It literally could be 3 separate songs because it plays that first riff for almost 4 minutes. And then it kicks into kind of like this kind of Sabbath groove right in the middle of it. And then it goes into what could be a fucking breakdown right at the end, right? How it's paced. That ending is terrifying. It literally sounds like the first part of the record, but an alternate take. And I actually wrote something down, like, as I was listening to that part, this whole album sounds like you're boiling in broken glass and vomit. Like it's just terrifying. And it's like, oh my God, like, where do you go from here?
You're right. I mean, it's like, it is a quick record. It's like less than 40 minutes, but you're putting in some work, like sonically for sure. Like it's not that it's a bad record or like, that's not what I'm saying, but you know, we like shit like this, but it's not pleasant. It's not a pleasant record. It is a fun record.
I gotta watch Saving Silverman after this shit.
Somebody put on Saving Silverman. I'll say my favorite track from this record, outside of the final song of the album, the opening song of the record, actually came out on a reissue of the record from 2006. I love the alternate version of Depress, which actually came out on their debut record, In the Name of Suffering. But they have an alternate take that came out on the reissue from 2006 that I think is a far superior version of the track. You know, it's so funny when you get like all of these little extra like little goodies, you know, when it's like the anniversary of the record or whatever. But they had like a Peace Through War has like an alternate version on that reissue as well.
I hate that version.
Do you? Yeah.
I'm sure it was just like a rough vocal under like his normal vocals, but it's obviously him like doing like a hardcore thing under it. But the way it's mixed, I'm like, did they get one of the guys from Biohazard on here? And I was like, and I hear it and I'm just like, oh, this is it's just a demo. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I can accept that.
Absolutely. And then there's another one, the Dopesick jam, but that version of Depress is really, really great. Kind of like Turn Back the Clock from 2006 reissue. But so after the record came out, they kind of locked him into some big touring, specifically in 1997, supporting White Zombie and Pantera on a kind of like the first part of this arena tour that they were doing. White Zombie and Pantera had toured extensively by this point together. I think even White Zombie even took Eyehategod on some early tours, but there's a really, really great article from Decibel that kind of covers all of the shenanigans that happened while out on tour. But, you know, obviously the tour was probably made possible, or at least Eyehategod getting on that tour in particular was because Phil, obviously frontman of Pantera, loves his hometown bands, had to get his buddies in Eyehategod on the tour. And man, there's a lot of shit that went down on this tour.
So, you know, the big one is that's the tour that Phil overdosed on, right? This was right after the release, I believe, of Trendkill, which would have been their 96 record. But I kind of want to go back to getting Phil having this great ear to the underground that he does and getting these bands out and showing them to people. What was brought up in that article is they talked about, I think her name's Sean from White Zombie. I guess she lives in New Orleans at this point. But she was a big proponent of getting underground bands on the tour as well. But a funny thing about her that I just figured out after kind of going through our trip to New Orleans here, or Louisiana, is that she helped write some of the songs on NOLA.
Really?
She was jamming with the dudes during that, maybe before like Todd joined the band, or maybe she was just helping write, but like I think she helped write the track Jail.
Wow.
On NOLA. But there's some fun stuff that happened on this tour, and there's also some really bad stuff that happened. The Kiss thing in Louisville.
Yeah, it's something along the lines of they had a day off in Louisville, and they got the backstage. They got on the list to go backstage at this Kiss concert, thinking that we're probably going to meet the band. It was going to be like some sort of like hangout thing, but I think they were so fucked up that they ended up getting pushed into another room away from everybody, just falling all over each other.
Someone jammed a chair underneath the doorknob when they put him in that room. They're just like, yep. Yeah, get him out here. Where are you guys from? New Orleans. I get in there. Get
there. That apparently Eyehategod has multiple stories from Louisville, because I was listening to a different interview, and they played in Louisville for some tour. Mike didn't like mention what tour it was or what year, but they showed up late to the gig. So late, in fact, that the sound guy had gone home. So the show was over.
Yes.
But some person that was like attending the show was like, "Hey, you guys come play at my house."
Oh my God.
So like the show got moved. The Eyehategod show got moved to someone's house, and they played in a fucking laundry room in someone's house in Louisville, Kentucky.
Could you imagine? Because I know Swindle especially. I've seen pictures of Swindle sitting on a dryer watching bands that played in his basement. Could you imagine if Eyehategod was just playing in your laundry room? Like, first of all, holes are definitely getting put. Like, your mom's coming home. She's going to be mad. You need to take your Game Boy away. But damn, that's going to be...
a video game?
Is that a video game? Hand it over.
Video game?
I mean, that's rad. That's a... Damn.
That is... This... I would love a book from either Jimmy Bower or Mike in particular of just like what it was like to like punk rock tour in that band. I mean, almost like a Get in the Van style book, right? Like I would love, and Mike definitely seems like the type of guy that probably did have a detailed like journal or a diary or anything like that.
The tour itself, like I would love to hear some stories like from those guys on this experience, because you know, obviously in the article they mentioned that, you know, you have Pantera and White Zombie, which it makes sense why they tour together. They kind of have like, they're different obviously, but there's a at least some part of it that makes sense that why they would be on the same
metal
bill.
bands.
Absolutely. Whereas Eyehategod, like,
there's a groove.
There was gonna be, and I think they knew this. It was gonna be an uphill battle trying to win over an audience that was going to see White Zombie and Pantera.
I don't think they minded. They
probably didn't give a shit.
Fucking relished it.
Yeah.
In fact, I meant to bring this up. I put this in my notes. Either Jimmy or Mike in one of the interviews said they literally started this band to piss people off.
That's very fitting.
They were just like, they literally said, let's make a hardcore band, but like really fucking slow. It'll piss people off. And that's the reason they started the band.
Isn't that like the Flipper thing? Wasn't that their thing for so many years? Was like,
basically, yeah.
Yeah, let's just play. We're a hardcore band or we're a punk band, but we're playing real fucking slow.
Yeah.
Like that is a level of pettiness that is just,
love it.
There you go.
The dynamic on the tour was interesting. Like off stage, it seemed like all the bands, minus a few people, like Rob Zombie wasn't like necessarily hanging out with the group, and that kind of maybe makes sense knowing that this would be White Zombie's final tour. I don't know if they knew it confirmed going in, but the mood was there. The writing was on the wall. They were pretty much done, but they had a great time. Dimebag Darrell would pretty much prank White Zombie every night. I read the story where he'd wear like an old man mask and a cape, and
there's
like
footage of that.
Is there really? Oh,
it's on the home videos. He walks out. It's a flag wrapped around him, and he's got a fake huge dick.
Like he's Dirk Diggler type of.
It's
like
got like
piece.
I mean, it probably looks like a roll of bologna. But like it's got it rigged up with like a hose, and he squeezes the hose and it shoots stuff out. But like he's in this old man mask walking out on stage, like it's there.
I love the one where he's dressed up as a technician and he's telling security guards where to go during their.
It's got the pillow in.
Oh, it's so funny. But perhaps the best Eyehategod story is, this is a band that is, they're not selling platinum records like some of these other groups on the tour. So they're in their they're like these touring acts, they're in their buses while Eyehategod's in the van. So, you're trying to like cut corners any way you can get. And then like all these groups, they're just leaving catering out, like all of the stuff behind. And so at one point, Rob Zombie, I guess, had some like cookies that he really liked. And there was some drama with that where like, who took my cookies? Like, maybe somebody forgot. I guess the guy forgot it at the venue. Sorry, man. But it turned out that every night while White Zombie was on stage, Eyehategod was going into Rob's dressing room and taking all of their shit. And he was like, they were eating like kings.
All right, guys, I just got to ask, who the fuck took Rob's ladyfingers? Like, come on. Wait a minute. Eyehategod, I'm looking your way.
So
like, they got fucking cinnamon sugar on their mouth.
I'm drooling. It's like it's a Critic moment where like there's a scene in the Critic where he's like chewing on something, just starts salivating and drooling and like looking up. Like all four of those guys, or five at that time, in that van just wailing on those cookies, dying laughing, knowing like, what the fuck's he gonna do about it?
Yeah, right.
Phil brought us on tour.
The other dude, this band was talking about being in a van, stealing catering from the other band's dressing room. This band was roughing it. I think I even read Mike Williams had like straight up lice before they went on the tour. He had lice going into this tour, and he had dreads at the time, and it just was it was rough, man. I couldn't imagine having to deal with like shit crawling on your hair.
I don't know if Rob Zombie can fucking go or not, but no matter who I am, I wouldn't have started a fight with fucking Eyehategod.
Never.
Like, no.
I mean,
like, I don't.
Jimmy's already missing his teeth. Like, what are you going to do?
They don't look like MMA fighters or anything, but they look like they got nothing to fucking lose. They look like they're taking you out along the fucking way.
I would just picture it like, chest bumping on tour, and like you just hear Jimmy go, and just go for it. Mike looks like he would eat glass in front of somebody just to like prove a point.
Oh yeah. That's like the thing they always say in a fight where it's like, hey man, sometimes those scrappy fellers are like, you know, I don't know. I wouldn't want to fuck with them. But with all of that said, with all like the record, the tour, obviously the tumultuous relationship with the label, for all its, you know, ups and downs, we got this record. What do you think this record's legacy is at, like, in all of the records of the Eyehategod thing? I mean, obviously we've gotten, you know, some earlier records that were maybe kind of released in maybe a closer stretch of time.
Mm-hmm.
Then there were some, you know, decade-long gaps. Even the latest record, what was it, like 7 years? Even, yeah. So with all of that said, why does this record stand out in the discography, you know, amongst other records that you could make the argument that they're all pretty consistent. They all pretty much have that driving Eyehategod thing. Why this record?
It's that blood-curdling fucking scream at the beginning of it that sets it up like you're watching a slasher film. That like you're walking into something you shouldn't be seeing or shouldn't be hearing. It's the overall vibe that this record is set. There's a very uncomfortable feeling to this album. It's claustrophobic. It's maddening. It's traumatizing. It's all those great descriptors like that. It's fucking memorable. That's the thing. It's catchy. It's fun. I mean, there are riffs on here when I was like sitting down and like just really honing in on it. I was just getting, you know, goosebumps all over me. And it's arguably, in my opinion, their best record. That's not to say anything they've done is bad. It's the same descriptor we had for Crowbar. This might be like peak Eyehategod. And it was kind of like, oh, we got to do something for the label. It's another one of those.
Yeah, right. Just, hey, we either have to break up or we just put out a record. And this band seemed like they were pretty good at just kind of feeling it out and churning out just hateful, despicable songs.
With
sounded
their tongue firmly planted in their cheek.
Absolutely. It sounded the best at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think just one of those kind of lightning in a bottle type things.
Yep.
You know, in and out. You listen to it, it leaves an impact on you. It literally walks up to you, punches you in the stomach, takes your lunch money, and then you're just kind of like left like, what the fuck? What do I do now? Like, what am I doing? Definitely from start to finish, a really, really great record.
A perfect marriage of metal, doom metal, punk rock, hardcore, fucking smashed together with a wall of fucking noise and screaming. They're another band that I think like kind of get the most out of doing the least, because admittedly I'm not like judging their musicianship, but they are like, yeah, we don't know what the fuck we're doing. We're just like playing what we think sounds fucking good. So it's not like their technical prowess is like on display at all times. They're just fucking making fun sounding riffs that are catchy, because they think they sound fucking catchy.
We've reached that point of the episode where we like to share some recommendations, some things we've been listening to. Swindle, why don't you, what have you been listening to, bud? Why don't you start us out?
My only new rec is the new Chelsea Wolfe single, Everything Turns Blue. I think it's her fourth single from her upcoming album, She Reaches Out to She, which is gonna be out on February 9th. Our goth queen has blessed us again with another single, so listen to that one.
Awesome. I have a couple. This past weekend, might be my like first really anticipated album of the year, dropped, debut record. I got a couple debuts for you actually, but Upon Stone, Dead Mother Moon is so good. It's out now on Century Media. This is a a mellow death band from California. They share some other members of there's like hardcore background. There's other metal bands that these members have played in, but definitely that 90s like Gothenburg sound. But then you also have moments with gore grind and black metal, and then there's acoustic passages and synth stuff, and it's like such a fun listen. It's only like 40 minutes long or so.
Oh, bud, that thing's like barely 30.
Yeah, it was so much fun. I listened to it. I've just been listening to it on my trips to and from work, and I instantly started over. There are some really great lead lines on this. There's like the guitar work on this album alone. If you had just done that, like some of the melodies and the hooks, awesome. You have guest spots. Brian Fair, Shadows Falls on a song, which was a single that they released previous to the album, but definitely the title track's awesome. There's some really, really great moments on it. And then even a bonus track, the Michael Graves era Misfits covers
what an interesting pick for a cover, man.
That's right. Yeah. When I was listening to the record, I thought it was done, and then it punches with that, and I'm like, oh wait, what? Like it was unique for sure.
Interesting choice. Yeah, I've listened to that a couple times myself, and I definitely got like In Flames, Dark Tranquility, you name it, some of those Gothenburg bands. I also got like Dissection on there as well. Like I love the artwork. It's very reminiscent of that era of music as well, with like, I believe it's a knight and a sword on the moon. Or the moon in the background, very Castlevania-esque.
Absolutely.
I like it. Really stoked on this record. Great production by Taylor Young as well.
Which, I can't wait to see what year he's going to have, having just come off of 2023 and all the records that he had a hand in helping release and kind of shaping sonically. This is a great start. Great first release for a band. The EP was awesome. Definitely check out Dead Mother Moon from Upon Stone. My next album, or my next single rather, is a newish. This is a newer band from the UK. It's a death doom band called Slime Lord. The Beckoning Bell is the latest single from this album that I will now try to pronounce. Cytridiomycosis. How would you have pronounced it, Dill?
I pretty close to that.
So Cytridiomycosis. Relinquished, which I guess cytridiomycosis is a infectious disease in some amphibians, maybe, perhaps, question mark. Go ahead.
I love this track. When I heard it, I was like, I gotta listen to this again because I can't really wrap my head around it. The first thing I noticed in this track, Swindle, you're gonna love this. It opens up with geese.
Yeah, it does.
It opens up with geese. Those geese murdered people. It's rad.
It's great.
So cool.
It's like 7 minutes.
Yeah.
It got me. I mean, yeah, that like opening like thing with the birds, and there's riffs all over this thing. I'd never heard of this band before, but it's going to be out on $20 spin, so I felt like I had to check it out.
Absolutely.
The album will be out on March 8th. I'm sure we'll perhaps get some other singles from there, but I mean, everything from the sound, the label backing it,
the
artwork, of course, as well. Brad Moore, who of course has worked with some other $20 spin bands like Tomb Mold and Worm.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know much about this band other than this is going to be another debut release this year. I'm looking forward to it. So check them out. Dylan, what do you got there, sir?
So I've got a couple. Let's start off with the most recent single from the UK slamming death metal band Ingested. This is their first single off of their upcoming release, which is due to come out April 5th on Metal Blade Records. The title of that album is going to be, this is a long one, The Tide of Death and Fractured Dreams is the title of the album. The song is called Paragon of Purity. It's modern sounding slam death. I love it. I have a affinity for this band. I saw them live a few years ago. They're very British. So like they're up there doing their thing. And like the guys, I mean, flashback to Jeff Walker cutting jokes. Like he's up there. He's like, chant along, sing the words if you don't. He's like, fuck, it's death metal. It doesn't matter if you know them or not. And just like kicks in and like, I love it. It's hyper produced. I don't know who did the production on it. Like it is very, very slick sounding, but like it's fun. It's just fun, ignorant music, and I can't wait. The artwork looks really fucking cool as well. I got another one I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing. Hopefully I get this one right. Theophanous or Theophonous.
Yes.
Yes. It's a track called Ashes in the Huron River, which is also the title of the album. This will be coming out on Profound Lore Records on February 9th. So just right around the corner. This was really cool. It's very Death Doom-esque, but what really struck me is like the guitar tone is very like kind of snappy and bitey on it. Almost like it's a Strat really maxed out, and the gain is like, it's probably a low gain head or something, but like it just caught my attention, and it's really fucking cool. I'd never heard this band before, and I saw the track released. I was like, all right, let's give it a shot. And I'm really excited for that.
Check those out. We'll be back next week. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Riff Worship. You can always follow us at Distortion891, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We also have a live show that airs every Monday at 6 p.m. Central on FM 89, WONC.org, and the iHeartRadio app. I should also mention Dylan started a kind of short form review show. You had all done a couple EPs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we're going to see some more reviews coming up, but I don't know. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I had started doing some written reviews maybe right before the pandemic. And I had a few, and I was reviewing albums that were either coming out or albums that I liked. And I just kind of fell off for it, whatever, life got in the way. And, it just seemed like now would be a good time to maybe start doing those again, but do them in more of a short form kind of format and just talk about records that are coming out that we enjoy, and to kind of, as we've discussed in the podcast for many episodes, we typically will pay attention to albums that are a little bit older or maybe a few years old, but like we still want to stay topical. We still want to talk about things that are coming out. So why not? Let's do that, get that information out there, and that way more people can listen to more new shit.
Absolutely. You'll see another one coming out this Friday.
Mm-hmm.
But until then, this has been Riff Worship for myself, Swindle, Dylan. See ya. Bye.